Cocaine.
When I first heard about Mizzurna Falls, I was impressed primarily by the scope of this weird PS1 game that never officially left Japan. A game from 1998 developed by Human Entertainment that pushed the boundaries of the PS1's hardware to create an exceptionally memorable world, a memorable story in a relatively familiar package. If you're acquainted with the works of a little guy named Mark Frost and David Lynch, two full names, I think it's safe to say there was some inspiration taken. Mizzurna Falls is a game that features time-based events with an entire town to explore and dozens of characters kind of doing their own thing at any given moment. Most of them aren't important. You can talk to this guy who has the flu and is going for a walk at like 4 a.m., which is actually pretty badass. And for all its simplicity, the OST is pretty good too. If it wasn't for the translation efforts of Resident Evie, who is responsible for the entire text translation and walkthrough, as well as Owl of romhacking.net, who, from my understanding, took that script and patched the game to be in English, this game might have been left in obscurity. And yes, the game does run at 15 FPS. Sometimes it crashes. There are other game-breaking bugs that are super fun to try and work around. And there are times where these bugs simply break your entire playthrough and there's nothing you can do to fix it, so you have to use someone else's gameplay footage and everyone hates you for not finishing the game for your video essay. But that's okay. Because while this game might be a somewhat technically impressive feat for a late PS1 title, even with its issues, it's really more memorable for its unique atmosphere with all of that glorious PS1 jank that accompanies it. And I want to take you through it today, because any excuse to revisit one of my favorite games on one of my favorite consoles of all time is a good excuse. So join me as we explore the mysterious, long-forgotten world of Mizzurna Falls.
At 6:13 a.m., in a forest just outside Mizzurna Falls, a small town at the base of the Rocky Mountains, a teenage girl was found unconscious and soaked in blood. The girl, Kathy Flannery, 16, had wounds all over her body that appeared to have been inflicted by animal claws. Police believe she was attacked by a bear. Only an hour later, at 7 a.m., Emma Rowland, 18, a classmate of Kathy's, was discovered missing by her mother, who alerted the authorities. Local police suspect the two events are connected. With a population of less than 2,000 people, the close-knit community of Mizzurna Falls is all too familiar with the two young lives that now hang in the balance.
Welcome to Mizzurna Falls, everybody. We're jumping right into it. I gotta say though, this cutscene lore dump is a neat approach. Stories like this are sometimes built up slowly. Maybe you spend a few days in the world growing attached to the characters and becoming familiar with the environments before the rug is pulled out from you with some major tragic event. With Mizzurna Falls, there's simply no rug to begin with. We have to learn about this community through the lens of tragedy, a lens through which someone's true nature is often revealed. We are put into the position of your average Mizzurna Falls citizen, waking up to this news without any further explanation. It's not the most original story ever told, see the title of the video, but as long as we're willing to accept that this is what the story is going to be, I think we'll all have a better time. This is where the prologue begins, and we finally meet our protagonist, Matthew, an 18-year-old high school student and childhood friend of Emma who's being woken up to the town news. Much like how the intro thrust us, the player, into the story without any preparation, Matthew is similarly waking up to discover the nightmare the town finds itself in. Winona, another one of Matthew's childhood friends, informs Matthew over the phone that Emma had been acting strange lately, distant and isolated. Maybe it has something to do with her disappearance, but we just don't know. Nobody really knows. That's the point. Welcome to storytelling. We finally take control of Matthew, and the game section begins in all of its low-poly PS1 beauty. Matthew lives in this charming little shed. There's not all that much space, but there is a bookshelf, a bathroom, a closet, and a small TV. I really like this place. It reminds me of my old office with its simplicity. Even better news, he has a pet dog outside. This dog's name is never communicated to us in-game, but digging through the files reveals that his name is actually Rodriguez, and yes, you can pet him. So the game's good. We head inside to meet Uncle Nas, who owns the property, and this is when we also meet the sheriff of the town, Morgan, a character who is apparently only 32 despite looking as though he's 45. Ad-lib a joke about me getting old. Wait, I'm not supposed to read that out loud. The current working theory regarding Kathy is that she was attacked by a bear who, according to Uncle Nas, had grown violent because it hadn't entered hibernation. Morgan also begins to hint that there's something suspicious about Kathy's case, but Uncle Nas once again pipes up, interrupting him to let everyone present know that he could capture the bear. Okay. We find out shortly after this conversation that Kathy's actually regained consciousness, so we rush over to the hospital where she's staying. This is the first time we really get a good shot of the town, and I just love this game's graphical style so much. They went for a semi-realistic art style that didn't age well at all, but it reminds me of something like Final Fantasy VIII. It doesn't look good, but it has this charm to it that I can't quite pinpoint. Arriving at the hospital, we're introduced to a woman named Barbara, a heavy smoker who always has something kind of weird to say to Matthew. Matthew's not allowed inside Kathy's hospital room, which is probably for the best if you ask the artists, but we can listen in from the hallway. And that's when Father Barton arrives, the local priest and adoptive father of Kathy. This is a man who is respected, trusted, and above all else, never questioned by anyone. He steps inside, eager to see his daughter conscious and awake, but the moment he enters the room, Kathy flatlines. And this should be a turning point, a moment that sends the community into a more skeptic state. but it isn't. No one raises a red flag at Kathy's immediate death following the appearance of her father. No one even seems to entertain the idea that the two events could be connected. The doctor mentions triggers, but nobody puts the two together. Or they're intentionally ignoring the connection. And that's the part that really stuck with me. In most stories, this would be a scene that breaks the illusion, that tells you that something is very wrong here. But in Mizzurna Falls, it's just another thing that happens. People acknowledge it and move on. This is a story beat for us as the players, not for the citizens of Mizzurna Falls, clearly. We really don't even get an opportunity to process Kathy's death either. It's extremely sudden and unexpected, and we're not even really supposed to be here. Before Matthew can leave and begin to come to terms with what just happened, he meets Dr. James, a psychiatric counselor who works in this hospital. How do I describe Dr. James? He's a stoic psychiatrist who researches indigenous tribes, a man of few words, and every one of them feels carefully chosen. This is a very smart man based on my initial impressions. I'm sure that's the aura he wants to give off, too. He already knows who Matthew is thanks to Emma, actually. It turns out they've had a few counseling sessions in the past. James brings up the potential of the case having supernatural properties and goes on to say that the natural and supernatural are the same thing. The distinction simply comes down to our lack of understanding. I don't really know what to make of that. That's not something normal people say. James tells Matthew that Emma had been having existential philosophical doubts as of late, as though she was living in fear of something, leaving us with further evidence that something was very off with her. Turns out Dr. James is a gold mine for information regarding Emma. He has a lot to say about her. So everyone has their theories. Some are rational, some are spiritual, but none of it feels like anything close to the full story, which is the point of the game. Okay, once again, hello, welcome to the Mizzurna Falls video, where there's a story that unfolds over time. This prologue is extremely dense with important information, including introductions for a good number of important characters. As of the prologue, we've already been introduced to, or at least learned of, Emma, Sarah, Kathy, Father Barton, Matthew, Winona, Uncle Nas, Sheriff Morgan, Barbara, James, and Rodriguez. From here on out, Matthew will be searching for answers. He's as skeptical about all of this as I am, and that's nice to see in a protagonist. Our story truly begins at the Mizzurna Falls Sheriff's Department. Snow blankets the roads, and behind the front desk sits Mary Lou, a receptionist with a passion for plants. Matthew finds a town map in the designated 1990s Sheriff Department smoking room, I guess because of the cold climate. This is an interesting little time capsule of a building. This map is quite the necessity, given just how massive this town is. There's a real sense of scale in Mizzurna Falls, as I mentioned earlier. Events happen in real time, so if you're late, you miss things, and it can be incredibly easy to do so. This is a concept that isn't too uncommon in older games, 1998 being no exception. In order to uncover the story behind what's going on with Kathy and Emma, there are a series of important events we have to be present for throughout the game. The timing of these events can be a bit strict, and it's actually extremely difficult to get through the story without a guide. Sometimes it can feel like there's a lot of pressure, you're always a few steps behind. Ironically, the game's open world can feel claustrophobic because of this. It's like browsing the early internet without a search bar. You know there's stuff out there, you just have no idea where it is. I guess fixing that was the original business model of Google. In a world of limited internet access where gamers were still drawing their own maps of the water temple on paper, a game like this would have had dozens of hours of replayability. I just don't know that it would have been dozens of hours of fun. Matthew tries to follow up on what Morgan said earlier, something suspicious about Kathy's death, but he shuts him down. He tells Matthew it's a job for the police, which is a line we'll hear again and again and again and again. That's when his cop partner Hudson Lang steps in with a lead. Emma was last seen around 10 p.m. last night by a local named Mel Aston. He's currently sitting in the interrogation room, so both officers step out to handle it. Before they leave, though, Morgan tosses Matthew a bone in the form of another lead, Cohen, someone who supposedly knows more about Kathy. Then he also tells Matthew not to get too involved. Don't worry, we will. Matthew's car, what we'll be driving for the next couple hours, is a beige Beetle straight out of Beetle Adventure Racing, which is awesome. Driving this thing around town makes you feel invincible. It doesn't matter how many times you crash or how fast you're going, you can always maintain that top speed of 80 kilometers an hour. Unless the giant car hitbox intersects with some other massive hitbox you can't possibly see. Following the lead, Matthew heads to Cohen's place. Cohen is a forest warden and the person who found Kathy's body, which makes him important, but not necessarily suspicious. Not to the town, at least. Morgan trusts him, and so does everyone else. Cohen tells us that he found Kathy in front of a tree with signs of a fire nearby. That's how he knows she wasn't alone. But I mean, she could have lit the fire by herself, right? I don't know what he meant by that. Cohen suspects she met someone in the woods and then a bear attacked her. And this isn't the first time this bear theory's been floated today. It certainly won't be the last, but this is also the first we've heard of other parties being present. Matthew heads over to Emma's house on the north side of town to talk with her parents and meet up with Winona. Her father, Steve, invites him inside, and we are officially introduced to both him and Sarah. Steve is the mayor of Mizzurna Falls, which complicates things for sure, but I'll let you in on a little secret. This fact is meaningless. It doesn't really play into the greater story. If anything, it's a coincidence that he's the mayor. We check in with Winona, who seems to be holding it together pretty well, all things considered. Matthew drives her home to the gas station she apparently lives at, and she reveals some more info to us. Yesterday, her and Emma were at the high school library. Emma was reading a difficult-looking book, but can only remember that it was a book on philosophy that was located on a high shelf, no title given. We can probably figure it out. I mean, how many books could have possibly ever been written? 100? Emma's disappearance and how she was acting yesterday, I feel like they've got to be connected. It's like she's guiding us somehow. It's like I'm having the strangest dream. Matthew swings by the high school to track down the book Emma was reading. Before he can even make it inside, though, he's stopped by Liz Holden, 26-year-old high school teacher. She was close with Emma, one of the only people Emma could open up to, supposedly. But when he asks her if Kathy and Emma were together last night, she just shrugs. She doesn't even think that the two cases are related. She does, however, say that something was off about Emma. Yeah, join the club. Inside the library, Matthew finds the book he was looking for, History of Philosophy. Okay, so it's a fairly broad topic. But there's a bookmark within that reveals a specific passage. Nothing exists, and if it did, no one could be aware of it. And if anyone was aware of it, they could not communicate it to others. This quote is something I would likely find myself internalizing. On a surface level, it's easy to interpret a statement like this as doomer nonsense, which Matthew actually states outright, albeit in 1998 speak. It's also possible to interpret this perspective as liberating, though. If nothing matters inherently and nothing exists, then you're free to view the world in any way you choose. I wonder which interpretation Emma internalized. What a mystery. Perched on a hill with the awesome name Cockland Peaks, we find St. Peter's Church. The road up is blocked by a conveniently timed rock slide that just so happens to have occurred last night, cutting off one of the only ways in or out of town. I'm pretty confident this is just a gameplay explanation to prevent the player leaving the boundaries of Mizzurna Falls. Inside the church, Matthew lets Morgan know that Cohen believes Kathy wasn't alone that night, which supports the theory that Emma and Kathy were together. Morgan nods, seemingly in agreement, but everyone still seems married to the bear explanation. Convenient how the town keeps circling back to it, somewhat resistant to other ideas until this bear thing is resolved. Dr. Samuel, ever the sensitive professional, refers to Kathy's death as kicking the bucket. He repeats the triggered by trauma theory and adds that the head nurse was present during the incident, which might be the only useful thing he said all day. Someone else we can talk to who has first-hand knowledge of the event. Matthew is kicked out of the council meeting as it begins, but he manages to eavesdrop through some very professional video game prowling. He pick up the box and put it down. Uncle Nas is the first to drop the word murder. Whether it's been stated outright publicly or not, this seems to be the first time anyone's really discussing it. Morgan believes murder to be a possibility, but Dr. Samuel mentions that despite the choke marks present on her neck, strangulation wasn't the direct cause of death. As we know, she died of shock. This both fuels the fire of post-bear theory, while simultaneously redirecting the narrative back towards the choking isn't important because it didn't lead to her death. Again, this just doesn't sit right with me. A search party is formed for later that afternoon. Men only. Emma's father tries to speak but can barely hold it together. Barely. Because of bears. And Morgan wraps things up by saying it's highly likely Kathy was attacked by a bear, but leaves room for the idea that there may be a killer on the loose. So either a bear did it, or a man did, or a scary third thing. Either way, the town feels weirdly at peace with this uncertainty, as long as nobody has to change their opinions of anybody. Honestly, if it wasn't for the bruising on Kathy's neck, they may have never even entertained the idea of looking beyond the bear theory, which is honestly a terrifying thought. It's just hard to trust what anyone says when all we've been able to observe firsthand was Kathy dying after Father Barton walked into the room. People can talk about bears and campfires all they want, but I'm just not buying it. This is what's so fascinating to me about Mizzurna Falls. As I stated earlier, we're being dropped into a world we're completely unfamiliar with. The characters are unfamiliar to us, the situation is new to everyone, and the only reason I know this town's layout like the back of my hand is because I've now played through the entire game twice. I think it's because of this unfamiliarity layer that it's so easy for us as the player to be highly skeptical of all of this nonsense. We have no reason to trust anyone as an outsider. We need new information and less theories being repeated ad nauseum. Or maybe I'm just cynical when it comes to things like this. You know, murder? We stop by the local diner because, of course, there's a local diner. Every small town has one, and this one's run by Lorraine, who seems to be the only person ever working here, despite the fact that her family technically owns the place. It's weird. I'm saying her family might not exist, and they're probably made up, and that's the mystery of Mizzurna Falls. When Matthew asks about Kathy, she responds with, "Her? Little Miss Church?" Real compassionate feelings towards the dead girl. Lorraine doesn't seem to know much about Kathy or Emma, but she does point out that they both had this distant, unreadable quality. Then Mel Aston walks in, returning from the interrogation room. He's Lorraine's boyfriend and the last known person to see Emma. Matthew presses Mel for info, but it's not until Lorraine steps in that he finally caves. He saw Emma on Cockland Peaks and she told him that she was heading to the church. Then he also insists they didn't talk. He can't get his story straight. If he didn't really talk to her, then maybe he doesn't have to carry any responsibility for what happened, right? Maybe this is a translation thing, but it really feels like he's just lying and bad at it. It would be freaking cool if they had cherry pie here, like the cool show. They mostly just have breakfast food. Matthew continues to talk to Lorraine after ordering some of it, and finds out a bit more information about the goings-on in this town, such as the protest at Aston Farm. The farm workers are protesting because Dennis, Mel's father, won't renovate their housing. Lorraine is of the opinion that Dennis should just go through with the renovation, though. He's got plenty of money to go around after all. Our next destination is Barrows Forest in an attempt to infiltrate the bear search party. Matthew brings up the choke marks that were mentioned at the council meeting earlier, but Morgan doesn't seem to believe there's a murderer. We don't have any proof that this was an attempted murder. Don't make a big deal out of it. Matthew tries to join the search but is denied. Morgan refers to him as a child, which I think is a bit of a stretch to call an 18-year-old, but we have no say in the matter, and we head to our next destination. If you want my opinion on this bruised neck thing, which I know you're just begging for, I have a pretty simple thought on the topic. I'm not the biggest fan of Father Barton. I have plenty of internal bias against the church already, and I'll be the first to admit that. But I also think he behaves weirdly, and most importantly, Kathy's response to him entering her hospital room, dying, raised some major red flags for me. I don't mean to immediately start predicting things, and I could be wrong, but come on. He definitely caused the bruising on Kathy's neck, right? I think that much is obvious. A protest is already underway out in front of the Aston residence. Dennis's farm workers are demanding better housing conditions, as we previously learned. Apparently, their current living situation is uninhabitable. Dennis brushes it off with the usual CEO hand wave. It's more complicated than you think, but I'll consider it. After the workers leave, apparently satisfied with that response somehow, Dennis throws a snide comment Matthew's way for some reason and disappears back into his mansion. I don't really claim to understand what the deal is here, but it really does seem to me like it would be in everyone's best interest to keep employees happy. I know, all the CEOs watching this video are laughing at me right now for saying that. Matthew takes this opportunity to snoop around a bit and he finds a note in Mel's room, 9 p.m. motel. Interesting. And that's when Mel pulls up, given away by his obnoxiously loud motorcycle. Matthew hides in the conveniently located dressing room and listens in as he makes a phone call. I've dealt with the Emma problem and I've got it with me, so quit worrying. So now we've got a note pointing to a late-night motel meetup and a phone call that sure sounds like a confession, though to what I'm not sure yet. But if you're still on Team Bear, I don't know what to tell you. You might still be right, though. Matthew slips out unnoticed and hits the road once again. We head up to Cockland Peaks to check out the worker housing situation firsthand, and I think I figured out what the issue is. All of the regular worker housing was replaced with low-poly PS1 models. And right on cue, Mel appears. What the hell do you want? You stalking me or something? You make me sick. There's not much else going on here, though. It's a little weird that Mel is just hanging around, but he has no more information to give us. The weirdest part, though, is how beautiful this area is. I seriously love the aesthetic of Mizzurna Falls, if that wasn't abundantly clear. This is a fictional town in the very real state of Colorado, and it shows. The mountains, the winter-prepared infrastructure, and dark snowy sky. I know it's a PS1 game, so there can only be like 8 polygons on screen before the console melts through your floor, but something about this aesthetic really does it for me. Matthew spots Uncle Nas outside of his shop and chats with him for a bit on the way to our next destination. Turns out they actually did find massive paw prints during their search of the forest, indicating the presence of a bear indeed. They're heading back out tomorrow with a smaller group since it's best to hunt a bear with fewer people, according to Uncle Nas. 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. Noted. Just across the street, we report our findings of the housing situation on Cockland Peaks to Lorraine. Matthew agrees that place is a mess. Apparently, the issue with rebuilding isn't even about money. It's about something more mysterious that nobody's allowed to know about besides Dennis. And I struggle to figure out what could possibly be such a major roadblock for this renovation project that also can't be communicated to the poor people who live there. If it's not about money, then what's the problem? If it was something innocuous, it wouldn't be an issue to explain it to the town, so it's probably something selfish and greedy and evil. Place your bets now. We stop by the hospital to follow up on Kathy's injuries and to see if anyone's willing to put together the obvious clues. Dr. Samuel is up first, and he's not exactly subtle. He waves off the idea of murder and chalks everything up to big city hysteria, whatever that means. His theory is that Kathy was in the woods with a guy, things got uncomfortable, she resisted, he choked her, then she was attacked by a bear. Classic scenario. Then he throws in a casual, "You never really knew her, right?" Which seems to be this town's unofficial motto. For someone so eager to dismiss speculation regarding the murder theory, he's weirdly comfortable speculating about a dead girl's final moments. We check in with Dr. James next. He confirms Kathy died of shock. Right, but what was the trigger? He won't say, or maybe he can't say. Either way, he stays neutral, which in a town like this feels like an out-of-place stance to take. People are very ingrained in their positions, and not blindly following that perspective definitely makes you stand out. He says that Kathy had deep trauma, and that whatever happened triggered it all at once. Then Matthew asks about the quote Emma bookmarked in her little philosophy book. James identifies it as Gorgias, a nihilistic worldview of his that Emma had apparently internalized. There was a side to Emma you never knew. Before we leave, we speak with the head nurse, someone who was actually in the room when Kathy died. She tells us Kathy had been unconscious until the moment Father Barton walked in, reinforcing the events we half observed through the door. "Don't worry," she whispered. "Father Barton has come for you." As we know, this was only seconds before Kathy flatlined. And still, no one connects the dots, or if they do, they don't want to admit it. This is when I began to actually get frustrated. These people are so blinded by their perception of Father Barton that they can't even see the obvious connection when it's laid out right in front of them and they're actively recounting it. It's like they've been brainwashed by small-town politics and decades of preconceived moral direction. It's starting to get a bit tiring. I guess if everyone pretends that link between Father Barton and Kathy's death isn't actually there, they can convince themselves it will just go away. Matthew heads into Barbara's hospital room and finds Liz here as well, and they have a brief conversation about Emma, who used to visit Barbara to listen to her stories. Not nice stories, according to Barbara. Matthew asks Liz if she knew what kind of girl Kathy was. All she can give us is that Kathy didn't seem like a very cheerful girl, which is not something you probably want to hear your child's teacher say. Father Barton stated that Kathy was introverted and wasn't much for socializing. Liz believes this introverted character trait may be what her and Emma had in common. Kathy's homeroom teacher would probably be able to provide more information about her personality, a woman named Holly who is usually in the staff room at around 2 p.m. So add that to the list of future destinations. Back at the sheriff's department, Matthew runs into Father Barton on his way out. He lets him know that Kathy's funeral is scheduled for 9:30 a.m. tomorrow, which, given the circumstances, feels like an absurdly quick turnaround. But no one questions it. Of course they don't. Yeah, let's have a funeral 20 hours after time of death, as fast as possible so we can stop thinking about it. When Matthew mentions that Emma may have gone to the church last night, Father Barton pushes back. No one would go there at 10 p.m., he says. Matthew reminds him that, actually, teenagers break rules for fun. And if I'm being honest, a walk up Cockland Peaks in the cold at 10 p.m. sounds really nice. He speculates that maybe they met at the church and went into the forest together, but he doesn't really seem to believe this. It's like even when given permission to think critically, he chooses not to. It's so annoying. Morgan doesn't offer much more. He still thinks Kathy and Emma's cases might be unrelated. Matthew is told again that he can't join the search party. They'll be carrying guns since they're hunting for the bear, and it's too scary for a literal baby like Matthew. The usual nonsense he's been fed this whole time. Until this bear thing is taken care of, nobody's going to even discuss alternative possibilities. Thankfully, Uncle Nas shows up and overrides Morgan. He says Matthew is joining tomorrow whether Morgan likes it or not. We're finally making some progress, but it's still not clear whether this town is hiding something or if they're just too afraid to look closely. All of this repetition, the perception the town as a whole seems to have about Kathy and Emma, the constant cycle of suspicious circumstances somehow leading back around to this intense focus on the bear. It's starting to feel less and less genuine. Why repeat these things so often if they're true?
Well, you always were a kidder, Steve.
You always were a kidder, Steve.
Well, you always were such a kidder, Steve.
You've always been a kidder, Steve.
Well, you always were a kidder, Steve.
Yeah, you always were a kidder, Steve.
Next stop, Bar Wolves. I'm not sure why an 18-year-old is allowed in, being the same age as a literal fetus, but apparently nobody checks IDs in Mizzurna Falls, unless you're trying to find answers. They also don't seem to check the spelling of their neon signs. I love these. I actually misspoke earlier. Mizzurna Falls takes place in the very real state of Coronado. Dr. James is here and he points Matthew towards Wolf, the owner and namesake of the bar. Matthew sits at the bar, orders a glass of milk like the Letterman jacket-wearing cool guy he is, and asks about Emma. Turns out, Emma used to come here often. Once she even stabbed a guy in the leg with a fork for being creepy. Wolf sided with her. Pretty baller move for both of them. She brought another girl with her once, though, but Wolf can't remember who she was. It could have been Kathy, but that feels like too obvious an answer. I think he might remember her, given the circumstances. Then Mel shows up, of course. Matthew pokes fun at him for being here underage, but apparently he's also on the milk train, and I totally believe that too, given his personality. He's about to leave when someone else walks in. Bonehead. Yes, that's his birth name. A man always keeps his promises. No wonder Emma ran away from you. According to Bonehead, Mel used to bring Emma here. He kept trying to win her over, but she wasn't interested, and Mel didn't take that very well. Matthew confronts him, Mel shoves Matthew, Matthew punches back, and this is when we're introduced to one of the greatest mechanics in Mizzurna Falls. You know Tekken? Yeah, now imagine if Tekken was friggin' good. We slowly throw punches and kicks. It takes 10 seconds to get back up if you're knocked down, and as we'll learn eventually, the fights become very unfair and one-sided. This first one's an easy win though, and Mel storms out humiliated. Wolf casually confirms that Mel had a thing for Emma and that his attitude took a nosedive after her disappearance. Real stand-up guy, that Mel. Let's not forget he's dating Lorraine too, and I'm sure you'll find plenty more reasons to dislike him. The driving aspect of Mizzurna Falls is weirdly very enjoyable. I've had plenty of time to mess around with it at this point, driving from location to location. The car is easy to control despite the variable and often low frame rate of the game, and it's neat to be able to explore such a large world for a PS1 game, even if there is a predetermined path we have to follow. This car doesn't have unlimited fuel though, so we have to refuel it every so often. There's no real money system in the game. Matthew is just loaded with infinite cash. He must be a YouTuber. So this refueling mostly serves as an immersive element more than anything else. And I greatly appreciate this decision. Fun over realism. At 10 p.m., Matthew receives a phone call from Winona, who wants him to meet her at the park. Upon arrival, we're treated to a cutscene. Winona reveals that one time Emma brought her along to bar wolves. So this is who Wolf was talking about earlier, not Kathy. Emma was wasted, and it was a side of her that Winona had never seen. Emma's secret life is something that's been reiterated a few times now. Maybe everyone else is simply putting on a brave face, but both Winona and Sarah, Emma's mother, seem to be the two who are by far the most disturbed by her disappearance. This is where we can choose to either hug Winona or just talk to her. As much as I wanted this to be a story that actually accounted for decisions like this to impact the narrative, it's mostly meaningless. These decisions do have an impact, but that impact is usually no more than a single flag that changes one small thing. Oh well, I guess we'll just have to wait for Mizzurna Falls 2. Matthew drives Winona home, she lives in a gas station by the way, and he heads home himself, ending day 1 of Mizzurna Falls. We've uncovered new details today, but the facts have yet to reveal themselves. We know Mel isn't telling us everything. I personally believe Father Barton probably had something to do with Kathy's death, whether anyone wants to admit that or not. And we know that Emma was living a life no one else fully understood. People love to reiterate this fact to us as though they know something we don't. But none of that seems to actually matter to this town. I really struggle to figure out what does. The next day, Matthew is up at the very normal human waking hour of 4:26 a.m., and we get an opportunity to observe the cold, quiet morning of Mizzurna Falls. For a moment, it almost feels like everything's fine. We know it's not, though, and there's a lot more we still have to uncover. Matthew heads to Barrows Forest right at 7 a.m., but has to sneak past the guard in front of the bridge when he steps away for a bathroom break. Uncle Nas manages to convince Morgan to let Matthew join, and we find ourselves in a cozy cabin preparing for a bear hunt. Up until this point, I had genuinely believed that the bear was a red herring, a scapegoat that the town was simply convincing themselves was the sole culprit behind the events. And honestly, it could still be that that's the case here. I feel like the emphasis on finding this bear is somewhat misplaced. Yeah, it's possible there's evidence to be found, but are we really only focused on this wild animal? After being paired up with Cohen, observing the deep scratch marks on the tree firsthand, and finding a freshly decapitated deer nearby. Alright, I'll admit it. There may have been a bear. Matthew sprints back to the cabin, which is definitely not the right way to escape a bear, but Matthew can actually run faster than bears. It says so in the game manual, I just didn't tell you. Lucky for him, there's a shotgun and plenty of ammo within the cabin, and this introduces us to the next minigame in Mizzurna Falls, the Shooting QTE game, a fast-paced series of QuickTime events. It's really not very difficult. The bear goes down after firing only 62 shotgun shells at it, I counted, and we find that it was holding a necklace in its paw. Matthew, who is still reeling from the experience of killing a living creature, notes that it seems to be of native origin, whatever that actually means. Right before the bear found us, Cohen made an observation that the ring surrounding the tree appears as though it was set up to be an ancient altar of sorts. So there's definitely some kind of occult theme brewing under the surface here. It's cool that finding and killing the bear resulted in something, but I really can't help but feel as though this story beat would have been far more interesting if killing the bear resulted in nothing instead. The town would then be forced to face the reality that a bear can't fully account for the death of one girl and disappearance of another, as much as they seem to want this to be the case. Don't mind me, though. I'm mostly contemplating the next chapter of the Mizzurna Falls fanfiction I'm working on. I'm only 600 pages in, so it's just getting started. The town now has its scapegoat. They got what they needed out of this bear encounter, even if I'm not happy with this development. Matthew leaves the woods and Piss Boy has nothing to say about it. He's just exhausted after all the hard work he's done here today. You know, standing by the bridge and listening to us fight a bear. God, I really hope I have to piss later. Stopping by the hospital, we're met by Barbara in the lobby, who drops a bit of a breadcrumb for us.
If you want to know about Emma, come to my room on my birthday.
It would be rude to come by empty-handed, so we need to add gift for Barbara to our shopping list. Matthew talks to Dr. Samuel, who believes that the bear definitely attacked Kathy, but is also just as certain that it didn't attack Emma. Logically, I guess I agree. Emma probably wouldn't be completely missing if she was heavily injured by a bear. Dr. Samuel handed the bear's body over to Uncle Nas since they were done checking it, and that means we're having bear steaks for dinner for the rest of the year. All 5 days that are left. Can you eat bear? I've never had it, so probably not. Performance versus authenticity. To a certain degree, I believe this balance was being struck by Father Barton at Kathy's funeral, either due to him simply mourning the loss of his daughter or because there's something more sinister going on under the surface. Guess which one I think it is. And this is where we're introduced to yet another new character, Loretta, someone we actually know nothing about. All she has to say is that she was acquainted with Kathy, and that she believes Kathy had no friends, nor anyone she could trust. No one brings up what happened at the hospital. No one even has all that much to say. It's a very quiet ceremony that feels more like an attempt to move on as quickly as possible, rather than a goodbye. Matthew met Winona here, but she leaves for Emma's house immediately after the very short funeral. On foot, of course. That girl loves her walks. You can actually find her walking around the town most of the time to her various destinations, which I think is neat. Very healthy. My in-universe roleplay of Matthew, which is heavily expanded on in my upcoming fanfiction, requires heading to Haynes' diner to get him his morning bacon omelet. But we're really only here to talk to Lorraine. Matthew shows her the note he found in Mel's room, 9 p.m. motel, and informs her that it is indeed Mel's. Maybe leave out the part about breaking into his room and stealing it, though. She gets pretty fired up, wondering what he was up to, as though sneaky behavior from Mel is somehow out of the ordinary. I can't say I blame Lorraine, but you'd think she would not be all that surprised by this. Right across the street, we can take care of a few things we're going to need moving forward. We grab some cigarettes for Barbara and pick up a lighter that we're going to need in the future. Not for Barbara, though. There's a very arbitrary and unpredictable scenario wherein we'll need this lighter. I'd be willing to bet the average person won't guess the circumstances. This is one of the many elements within Mizzurna Falls that makes it nearly impossible to beat. You can tell this lighter is very important, too, because it unlocks a new icon on the inventory menu. Uncle Nas hints at some backstory for Barbara. I shouldn't be gossiping. It happened over 40 years ago, after all. We're getting a lot of mysterious nods towards Barbara's importance today. That birthday can't come soon enough. Before visiting the church on Cockland Peaks, we stop by the sheriff's department and find that the bulletin board mentions the bear being killed. On one hand, we find out that Cohen's in good condition after his injuries, but this announcement feels like a truth burial. As far as the town is concerned, this definitively closes the case on what happened to Kathy. After the long drive up to the church, we spot Father Barton walking in just as we arrive. He's praying for forgiveness, confessing his sins to the Lord and praying he forgive Kathy's sins as well. He then begins to preach to Matthew a bit about how we're all born in sin and we live under its burden. Most notably, though, he mentions that by Kathy dying, she has been released from this burden and will never sin again. He even says, "It seems like it was a blessing she died." Really? I guess I kinda get the point he's making, but also, fuck this guy. If it were under other circumstances, I would probably be a bit more lenient, but yeah, this guy sucks. Outside of Emma's house, Matthew spots Mel's bike, which is very out of place and suspicious. The last time we were here, Matthew wanted to check out Emma's room for any clues, but Sarah was in no emotional state to allow that. Now that she's a bit more put together, she invites us upstairs to check out the room finally. Within this room that I'm giving the award for brightest fucking room of all time, Matthew finds a key that he thinks looks familiar. He stops by the bathroom before leaving and finds a mysterious ring with the letter I engraved on it. Mel's bike is still outside when Matthew leaves, too. Matthew meets Winona and shows her the key he found in Emma's room. She immediately recognizes it as a locker key for the school, so I think I know where we're headed next. Turns out, though, they're not actually allowed within the main building since the school is closed for winter break. Instead, Matthew and Winona stop by the staff room to talk to Liz in an attempt to convince her to allow them access. They show her the key and everything, but she denies them entry, claiming that Matthew's not the type of student who'd come to school over the holidays. I feel like I should be upset by this, but I mean, what, so he's not a nerd? That's fine by me, bro. I decided to go back to see what would happen at Emma's house. Mel's bike being there really struck me, and sure enough, like clockwork, he appeared, walking around the side of the house all casually and speeding off like nothing happened. After standing outside of Emma's house for a
Normal human amount of time.
Matthew is invited back inside to see what's up. This is when Steve questions him about Kathy. He's seen Mel with Kathy before in front of bar wolves. I was surprised, to be honest. She didn't seem like the kind of girl to play around at night. I guess Steve just knows everything about Kathy. He's the authority. Morgan eventually lets us know what's going on. Sarah thinks someone broke into Emma's room. Good old sensitive Morgan found no evidence of a break-in, somehow, and believes the stress over Emma has gotten to Sarah. Which, I just hate this dismissive attitude of his. We know better. Why else would Mel have been at the house? Not to mention that just blindly assuming that someone's too hysterical and can't possibly have anything meaningful to contribute because they're upset is such a typical trope to attribute to men. Like, we should probably listen to people when they say things. Have we not learned our lesson about that yet? Are we still living in the 1990s? Matthew investigates for himself and finds that Emma's desk is open. Sarah points out that specific drawer is always locked and contains Emma's diary. So Matthew's better at investigating than Morgan, I guess. Man, I feel so bad for Sarah. Throughout this entire story, the most we get of her characterization is that she's extremely distraught. This makes plenty of sense, but it's just that it can be tough to watch sometimes. It's past 2 p.m., so this Holly person should be at the school's staff room. Talking to her would allow us to potentially uncover some more information about Kathy. Before entering the staff room, though, I noticed this poster. A poster for the full moon party that they had at the start of the month. We find a number for the party planning committee, taking the form of PS1 face buttons. See, Mizzurna Falls takes place in a cool alternate universe called Corralado, where Sony was so influential that they rewrote the entire concept of phone numbers, turning them into shapes. Pristine theatrics, man. Matthew calls the shape's number and asks about Kathy. It turns out she wasn't very cooperative. She joined, but didn't do much of anything. She claims she only did so simply to rebel against her father. A party celebrating the full moon is the equivalent of devil worship, after all, according to Kathy. We also learn that there's a mysterious wall painting in the basement of the church showing the devil worshipping the full moon, which might be one of the weirder things you can keep in a church basement. And so this struck me as particularly bizarre. Why the hell would that be in a church basement? This reinforced my newly developing theory of the occult being prominently involved in these two cases. Maybe what Dr. James said earlier about this case having supernatural properties isn't too far from the truth, as bizarre of a thing to say as that is. Matthew finally talks to Holly, Kathy's homeroom teacher, and she gives us even more interesting information. Kathy was friendless and deliberately distant. When Holly would attempt to nudge Kathy in a more social direction, she had a very interesting response. "I have the Lord and my Father." Words spoken not in a genuine manner as though she truly felt this, but rather from the mouth of someone who was attempting to deceive themselves. This difference was obvious to Holly. Matthew headed back to Haynes' diner for his nightly burger, per the rules of the roleplay, but observes Mel walking in right before him. Lorraine and Mel are arguing. He's asking her to do something that's beyond her comfort zone, and not in a healthy way, judging by her offended demeanor. First thought that springs to mind, something illegal. Knowing Mel, that's probably a safe bet. Before leaving, Matthew very inconspicuously hears the farm workers at a booth talking about their continued protesting of their living conditions, and they reveal Dennis's phone number in the process. And I use the term number loosely here. Remember, this is Sony's world, and we are just making phone calls in it. Matthew stops by to wrap up the day's findings with Morgan and learns some of the history about the necklace he found in the bear's paw. Apparently, Father Barton gave that necklace to Kathy, but it was then removed from her possession by an unnamed third party before the timeline of the bear attack. Someone else had it the night of. Given the fact that Kathy was a victim of the bear attack, but also wasn't in possession of the necklace at the time, this means someone else was there and that person had the necklace. That's what the game wants to try and tell us. 'Cause how else would the bear have gotten it? He could have bought it. Shoot, I didn't think about that. The sun sets early during this time of year. By 4:30 p.m. it's already dark, but that doesn't stop the investigation. At 8:45 p.m., Matthew overhears a conversation at the cemetery between Mel and Bonehead. "So, when are you going to return the money?" "Tomorrow, around noon, I'll be coming into some major cash." "Just make sure this ends tomorrow. We won't wait any longer. He ain't as forgiving as I am." Father Barton is outside of Bar Wolves once again, but this time Matthew asks him about the necklace. He said he found it in the church basement, and Kathy took a shine to it. "Looking back on it, that necklace brought her nothing but bad luck. It was worn by that devil." That basement is just full of weird shit, huh? Kathy gave the necklace to someone who needed it more than her. Naively, Father Barton assumes that if she was attacked by the bear, she must have had it that night. And I'm not sure I agree with that interpretation. In fact, I'm not even sure what to make of this whole necklace nonsense. I think the general idea being presented to us is simply that Kathy wasn't alone that night. That's all. The necklace at this point is just a vessel for that piece of information. Away from the cold of the night, Matthew shows Wolf the ring he found in Emma's bathroom earlier in the day. The ring is apparently a type worn by some nasty people, according to Wolf, gang members who use the rings to identify each other. Normally, visits to this bar are quick and eventful. Read some poor English neon signs, grab a tall glass of milk, and get out of there before bedtime. Tonight, though, we stick around a little while longer, and at 10:30, someone named Isabella walks out on stage. Not to perform, but rather to announce the opposite. She won't be performing tonight for personal reasons. After this, we head home and wrap up day 2. Day 2 was certainly annoying. We went to seemingly random places in seemingly random order to get what is effectively confusing, conflicting information. But the town finally got what it wanted. A conclusion. The bear is dead, the funeral is over, the right things were said in the right places by the right people, and now everything can go back to normal, right? Underneath it all, though, nothing really changed. If anything, things feel worse now. The necklace, for example, serving as a weird, confusing obelisk in the darkness of Kathy's death. Father Barton believes this necklace brought her bad luck, which is a weird thing to say, but it doesn't really mean anything yet. Waking up early might be my favorite pastime in Mizzurna Falls. Today, we're starting out at the boathouse and spend a few hours just observing the PS1 water. Matthew meets up with Winona with a familiar destination in mind, the high school. Winona in tow to serve as the resident nerd who can get him into the main building. It works, but I'm not convinced Liz is buying the forgotten notebook excuse. Inside Emma's locker, they find a retro camera and a 3D printed save icon. Is this really the kind of stuff people kept in their school lockers in 1998? They discuss the case a bit more, but neither Matthew nor Winona really have any idea how Kathy and Emma are connected. They're pretty set on the theory that they are, though, and I'm inclined to agree. One girl gets killed and the other goes missing the same day? That can't be a coincidence. Now we have 2 more key items that could potentially uncover valuable information. Not just a stupid necklace whose owner can never seem to be properly identified. The photos from the camera need to be developed and the disc needs to be read, neither of which are tasks we can complete within the school, so we head out. It seems as though it's impossible to talk to Morgan without having him go inside his desk for some reason. He always does this, and it's pissing me off. Matthew talks to him a bit about joining the police force potentially, seeing as how he's up to his eyeballs, and he doesn't completely reject him on the spot. Matthew shows him both the camera and the floppy disk, and he says that Mary Lou might be able to find out what's on that disk. I don't really understand why he wouldn't just confiscate these from Matthew right here, but we seem to be entering an era of greater trust from Morgan, and this is a pretty big indicator of that. Matthew shows Mary Lou the disk, and she figures out that it contains audio data. It's a proprietary type of disk, of course, so it can't be read by just any computer, only by an electronic keyboard that was specifically made to that same standard. Very 90s. Matthew leaves and goes to drop off the camera to get the photos developed and heads to Emma's house. Luckily, Emma just so happened to have a keyboard that was compatible with this floppy disk. Really, it makes sense. I'm not sure why she would have a disk format she couldn't use on anything she owned, though it would have added to the mystery. That's a very good starting point for Chapter 77. Sarah immediately recognizes the disk, and so we pop it into the keyboard. It's a song called Eternal, one of Emma's favorites, something she would often play. Morgan's patrol car is in the parking lot of Haynes' Diner, so we now know the man enjoys an early lunch. Inside the diner itself, we talk to Lorraine, who seems to be very on edge about something. I never thought Mel would be that stupid. Morgan has a bit of information for Matthew about the burglary, but it's nothing we don't already know. Emma's diary was stolen. We could have told you that. No clue who these two are, though I think I may have an idea regarding the identity of one of them. The blonde guy, not Mel, the other robber, is entirely unfamiliar. He shakes down Matthew, who resists at first, but Lorraine has an interesting line for us. Matthew, that's a real gun. This is a smart assumption to make, given the circumstances, but she seemed pretty confident with that statement. And in a convenient move, Lorraine managed to leave all of yesterday's earnings in the cash register on top of whatever they brought in today, meaning the robbers got the exceptionally rare big haul from a small town diner. After the pigs leave, Matthew confronts Lorraine privately about the red flags she's been raising all day. The jumpy behavior before the robbery even happened, the confidence she had that the guns were real, the fact that all of yesterday's money was inexplicably still in the cash register. And she reveals everything. The robbery was planned in an effort to get Mel the money he needs to pay back Bonehead. I like Lorraine. She seems nice enough, but man, she makes some bad decisions. She doesn't even have any leads for us, tells us,
He must be laying low somewhere right now. I don't know where, though.
well, it's up to us to find out. One of the obvious hiding spots would be the farmer lodgings on Cockland Peaks. We find the blonde guy here wearing the same exact outfit and enter into a cool stealth section. One of those stealth sections where the guy we're hiding from will double back to make sure nobody's following him, in a very realistic manner. He eventually leads Matthew to the hideout with its Sony brand padlock that has the simplest combination ever, though it helps that he said it out loud. Inside, Matthew finds Mel and Bonehead having a conversation. They're desperately trying to wrap up their business dealings, with Bonehead frustrated at Mel's general incompetence. Matthew didn't think to clear the bathroom first, though, and the blonde guy walks out and spots him. After some bickering between themselves, there's another fight sequence. Finally, we can put a name to this mysterious blonde dude we've been seeing all day. Robber. Okay. Kicking his ass wasn't enough, so Bonehead pulls a gun on Matthew. If only Lorraine was here to tell us whether it's real or not. I don't know if I should be scared. We don't have time to find out, though. Morgan arrives and arrests Mel and Robber. Well, they kind of arrest themselves if we're going by these animations. Morgan's pretty upset at Matthew for playing vigilante, and I get it. Matthew continues to find himself in these increasingly dangerous scenarios, yet he manages to escape every time like an anime protagonist. Bonehead did manage to get away, and there was no evidence remaining in the cabin. If Lorraine hadn't called Morgan to let him know what was going on, it's likely Matthew would have actually been killed on the spot, and the bad guys would have gotten away. See, I knew she was a good guy. Quite a long drive awaits Matthew as his next destination is Mel's room to retrieve Emma's stolen diary. He's in jail. He can't conveniently show up and catch Matthew again. And I'm actually not foreshadowing. I realize how that sounds now. Being the good boy I am, I didn't even think to read the diary until realizing that I had to. There's very important information contained within.
December 21st. Miss Holden doesn't understand how I feel. I don't know what's right and what's wrong. What are we even alive for? Just thinking about it hurts my head. I'm all alone. Winona seems worried about me, but if she knew the real me... No, I don't want to think about it. December 22nd. Isabella seemed so sad tonight. Her singing fills my heart with both joy and sorrow, but there's no light in her life. She's being controlled by that man. Isabella needs help. December 23rd. I'm dreading the thought of meeting Mel at 9 p.m. tonight. Kathy says we need to, but I don't want to depend on that kind of thing. All I want is a little relief.
So this confirms that Emma and Kathy did indeed know each other, and finally we have some solid evidence of this. But this thing that Kathy said they needed, what is she referring to? Matthew hands over Emma's diary to Morgan, and he finally recognizes our worth. Bringing him such an important piece of evidence results in Matthew being promoted to honorary sheriff. He even gets a badge to prove it, and it's not fake. Before Matthew can head out to continue investigating as an official honorary sheriff, by the way, he spots Father Barton leaving the sheriff's department. Between his preaching about today's youth having no morals, as though that's somehow a profound concept that only he's ever said, and whatever other nonsense he was spouting, he tells Matthew he was there in an attempt to get Mel to repent.
If you're ever tempted to sin, remember that you will suffer eternal damnation. Don't ever forget that.
God, shut up, dude. So Matthew visits Mel's holding cell to see what's up with the Father Barton visit. Mel feels no remorse, naturally, and he has a few choice words for Father Barton. Choice words I very much enjoyed hearing. I don't generally find myself agreeing with Mel, but I've never felt more connected with him than in this shared moment of hatred towards Father Barton. I almost forgot to pick up the photos we had developed earlier. This is a real thing that you used to have to wait to happen back in the 90s. When Matthew arrives, though, he's informed that Winona picked them up ahead of him. That's fine, I guess. We trust her. It just means we have to go find her if we want the photos. But we have another destination that's a bit more urgent: the motel where Emma and Kathy met Mel. Matthew asks the guy at the exposed receptionist desk, which is a great choice in this cold climate, if he can get information about who stayed here at 9 p.m. on the 23rd. Initially, he's withholding, but folds under the tiniest amount of pressure Matthew could possibly exert. In room 3, someone named Kathy Rowland checked in, Emma and Kathy's names combined. She hasn't checked out yet, and the owner doesn't seem to have a spare key for the room, which seems irresponsible, but convenient. On the bright side, this means the room is completely untouched. If we can get in there, we can probably uncover some more information. Matthew asks Father Barton if he might have the key, and he immediately finds it in Kathy's room. That was easy. If he had this, why wouldn't he go down there to find out what happened to his daughter? He also gives Matthew money. He claims it's to pay for the room checkout. Not only does Matthew already have unlimited money, as we learned from refilling the car with gas, but this gesture feels off to me. I can't even really figure out what kind of bribe this is meant to be exactly. Maybe don't tell anyone what you find in the motel room? I don't intend to honor any unspoken agreements made by accepting this bribe, so Father Barton can just deal with that when the time comes. I'll spend this money on Sour Patch Kids or something. A 5-pound bag of them. That's healthy. Back at the motel with the key, Matthew steps into Kathy's room. The place is still a bit of a mess, but nothing seems all that out of the ordinary at first glance. When he steps into the bathroom, though, epic written in blood on the mirror. Between the two beds, there's a crate. You know, the motel crate you find in every motel room across America. Underneath it, there's a bag labeled Epic that has 2 pills inside.
You got drugs.
Well, this is an interesting twist. I suppose it shouldn't be surprising that drugs are involved in a 1990s game featuring a character who looks the way Bonehead does. Interesting name choice, though. We're taking these to Dr. Samuel to have them identified. Right now, they're just some pills we found. No clue what secrets they hold. Matthew stops by Winona's house to refuel and see if he can get those pictures from her. Turns out there were only 2 on the camera roll, so it's kind of a waste of money. One of the images was completely black and indiscernible, and the other is a shot of the bridge that blocks off access to the rest of Barrows Forest. There are a few people we can show this to in an attempt to gather more information. Matthew shows the picture of the no-entry bridge to Barbara, who's hanging out in the lobby, and she immediately reaches a conclusion.
Emma was in here. She went in, and then she made up her mind.
Barbara brings up a cave painting, mentions it was left by the ancient people of this region, a world those of us living today don't understand.
That cave, you start thinking strange things in there.
Matthew shows Dr. James the photo as well. His response is more calculated, of course.
There's a cave painting inside there. Native. Maybe Morgan will let you in there if you ask him.
Matthew does have a badge after all. Dr. James goes on to say, however,
it's not exactly heavily secured. You could just climb over that fence.
Huh. Matthew gives the drugs to Dr. Samuel, and he agrees to have them identified for us. Dr. James, being an ex-pharmacology specialist, might actually be able to identify them. Or maybe Keith? He mentions a guy named Keith for some reason. You guys know Keith, right? He's been an important part of the story. If you don't remember him, then you haven't been paying attention. Matthew needs to talk to Morgan, but he's not in his office. Doing some sleuthing, I managed to find him outside of Mel's house. Doing what? I'm not sure. Matthew shows him the photos, and he also brings up the cave painting that Barbara told us about. The government forced Morgan to close off access to that area for some reason, and so he simply did as he was told. He agrees to show Matthew inside the cave in a few hours if he meets him at Barrows Forest. Hey, this is just one of the perks of being honorary sheriff. Normal people wouldn't understand. Interesting that there would have ever been government influence involved in this case. True to his word, Morgan meets Matthew at Barrows Forest 2 hours later and they enter the cave. There's speculation about the image depicting people worshipping the sun, but Matthew doesn't seem to hold this opinion, though he can't discern any other meaning. Morgan quickly points out that he doesn't even think this cave painting is related to the case at all, which is just so naive at this point. I don't really have anything against Morgan, but he does come off as incompetent at times. I think he just wants to get out of this cave. According to Dr. James, who actually has something of value to say, the cave painting is around 1,000 years old. It depicts an ancient ritual used to bring the dead back to life. According to his research, the native tribespeople were able to die while still living, whatever that means. The ritual depicted in the cave painting is called the Death Journey Ritual, a ritual wherein a person is killed and then brought back to life. Dr. James seems to also imply that this is the kind of thing Emma was looking towards in order to find the answers she wanted. He was able to see the cave painting because of Cohen, who granted him access. Cohen used to be a colonel in the military, someone of relative importance, which isn't all that surprising given the responsibilities he was granted in the town. Normally, conversations with Dr. James feel grounded, as though we're talking to someone intelligent and knowledgeable, but this conversation feels a bit off. He seems to not only believe in this death journey ritual stuff, but is also attributing it to Emma, a missing girl who he doesn't seem all too worried about despite their history as client and psychiatrist. Given his usual demeanor, I wouldn't expect him to be visibly anxious about anything, really, but in the context of this conversation, I don't know. This is when Isabella comes out on stage, the bar's resident singer, singing that song that Emma loved so much, Eternal. Apparently, Isabella just kind of showed up about a month ago out of the blue. That's according to Dr. James. She then started singing at the bar, and we're not really sure what else she does. Then we got this guy, an annoying, obsessed fan trying to get poor Isabella's attention. Matthew, the high school cool guy, kicks his ass and he leaves after we extract Isabella's phone number from him. Matthew talks to Isabella a bit, asks about Emma. She claims to know her, but refuses to elaborate any further and heads backstage, cutting off our access. However, Dr. James lets Matthew know that Isabella leaves just after midnight and that he should just follow her. At least we know what our next move is. As Matthew leaves the bar to wait outside in the snow for hours like normal humans do, he spots Father Barton preaching to a group of teenagers, telling them they shouldn't be coming to this bar.
Cease your sinning and return to your families.
Listen, I can't condone violence, but I also can't condone harassing people outside of a bar. I'll take the middle ground here and say that nobody was in the right, but Father Barton insists we don't press the issue any further. And in his position, that seems like a good idea. Eventually, Isabella leaves the bar and Matthew follows her home very inconspicuously.
Hey, Isabella, where are you going? Hey, Isabella, where are we going? Hey, can you hear me? Isabella, are you going home?
This awful, rundown apartment is actually home to Uncle Nas as well, which is weird. I thought he lived in a house attached to his shop or something. Matthew stops by his room and asks about Isabella. Naturally, he believes Matthew's intentions are impure and unholy, and seems more willing to reveal information after convincing himself of this.
I've seen a lot of shady guys coming and going from her apartment. Those guys are up to no good, no doubt about it.
We're not actually here to talk to Uncle Nas, though, so we leave him to his vodka and Band-Aids and entire pizza to go to Isabella's room.
He's lucky it was me who spotted him and not Wolf, that's all.
Despite Matthew's creepy behavior, arguably even worse than the guy he beat up at the bar, Isabella seems to be cool with him being in her room. I don't know why. He regains consciousness while she's still in the shower and begins to snoop around. Of course he does. In the process, he finds a picture of her with some guy who apparently looks familiar to him. Naturally, Isabella scolds Matthew for his behavior and warns him that something even worse could have happened to him. Thanks to Emma, it appears as though Isabella knows who Matthew is, which might explain why she wasn't so creeped out by him. Isabella reminisces about Emma, saying that she reminds her of herself years ago.
Losing the will to live, having no one to turn to, feeling so alone.
That's cool bonding themes for them. The guy in the photo Matthew found was her husband. 2 years ago, he died in a car accident. Matthew remarks that he looks like Wolf, and Isabella reveals that her husband was Wolf's younger brother. After the accident, Wolf gave her a chance to sing at his bar, as well as a place to live.
I made a deal with the devil to free myself from my loneliness. And when you make a deal with the devil, he always gets you in the end.
It's hard to let go of a line like that. That's not something people normally say when their lives are cool and normal. And that's another day done. We head home and wrap up day 3 in Mizzurna Falls. The drugs, this song that seems to hold so much meaning, Dr. James's weird fascination and deep understanding of this death journey ritual. There are a lot of new story threads that we have yet to explore. If nothing else, we managed to finally confirm Emma and Kathy's connection. And surprisingly, this connection seems to also be tied to this singer, Isabella. Depending on the choice made during the conversation with Isabella last night, the tape of her song Eternal will either be given to Matthew before he leaves her apartment, or it will appear in his mailbox the next morning. This is what I mean when I say that decisions matter in this story, but only on a very small scale. Winona calls Matthew at 11 a.m. to let him know that Mel's being released. Dennis paid his bail. I'm not surprised. When we arrive, we catch the two of them leaving, but not before having a very public argument. God, these two suck. Everyone sucks. Winona is the only cool character, I've decided. Cohen is in Morgan's office, so we chat with him a bit. He confirms that he was indeed in the military, left 5 years ago. He feels a level of regret at not finding Kathy sooner, despite his role as guardian of the forest.
It's not fair that an old codger like me gets to linger on while a 16-year-old girl has to die.
If I ever had any doubts about Cohen, I have to say that this conversation with him sufficiently humanized him in my mind. At this point, I know who my marks are, and Cohen isn't one of them, even if I may have suspected him a little bit at first. Outside of Haynes' diner, after Matthew has had his mandatory role-play pancake lunch, we get a phone call from Dr. Samuel. He's identified the drugs, but won't tell Matthew what they are over the phone, so he heads to the hospital to meet Dr. Samuel in person. Morgan's here too, actually being responsible. It turns out that the drugs are some kind of powerful, synthesized hallucinogenic, popular on the West Coast in the 60s. 1960 was 38 years ago when this game was made, and it is now 98 years ago. Time, man, it's crazy. Matthew explains where he found the drugs, and it's at this point that Dr. Samuel finally acknowledges that maybe there's more to this case than just the bear. Morgan, on the other hand, is pissed. Drugs? In his town? It's more likely than you think. He immediately storms off to find Mel and arrest him once again. If only this had happened 2 hours ago, then he wouldn't have been bailed out in the first place. Dr. Samuel elaborates a bit more on the drug's effect. It's the same thing you get from any other hallucinogenic, really. A good trip is awesome, but a bad trip feels like you're on the verge of death for a day and a half. 3 hours of
casually hanging out in the hospital like a normal human.
Later, Matthew visits Barbara. Today's her birthday, finally. He gives her the gift, and after Liz steps out to visit the cemetery, Barbara begins explaining her experience interacting with Emma. It seems Barbara served a bit of a mentor role for her. Having lived through a tragic event herself 40 years ago, Barbara felt as though she had the experience to help guide poor lost Emma. Matthew tries to find out more information about this mysterious event, but it's too difficult for Barbara to talk about, and she directs him towards Liz if he wants to find out more. There was a murder. December 31st. Barbara's little sister was killed. The murderer killed his victim as part of a satanic ritual, and then killed himself shortly after to evade capture. It's all preserved in the papers back then, which would have been 1958, by the way, and we can find that information on the computers at the school library. Remember when newspapers were the most efficient news source? Me neither. I'm only 30. Yeah, only. Matthew stops by for a quick chat with Lorraine at Haynes' Diner. He asks about her boyfriend's drug dealing, of which she claims she had no knowledge, which I don't really believe, and Matthew leaves us with an interesting thought before we head out.
I have a feeling Lorraine's going to try something today.
As Matthew steps outside, he sees Robber leaving the diner at the same time. He confronts him. It really seems like Matthew just has no fear when it comes to this investigation, and Robber begins to run. Bad idea, idiot. Matthew can outrun a bear. Dumbass didn't read the game manual. He stops Robber right outside of the print shop, and we have to beat him up to get any answers. Stop making me hit you, man. He finally reveals that Mel is waiting at the motel, but Matthew has one more destination before visiting him. I've mentioned Mizzurna Falls' time-based event system and tendency to cut things a bit close before. In my first playthrough, this became a problem multiple times, but it turns out when you know the layout of the town and can head to any destination without needing to reference the map, these time-based events don't feel nearly as strict. It makes me wonder what exactly Human Entertainment was going for as far as difficulty is concerned within this game. I used a guide, so I would imagine if you didn't, this game would basically be impossible to complete, though it might provide a more exciting gameplay experience having to figure things out on your own. Anyway, the computer in the school library holds the information we are looking for. A young man living at the church going by the name Cougar murdered someone. Cougar, aged 24, attempted to perform the death journey ritual, once carried out by the indigenous peoples of the area, using Barbara's 18-year-old sister as a sacrifice. In the end, Cougar was hunted down into the forest where he took his own life, hoping that he would be resurrected as part of the ritual. You can guess how that worked out for him, I'm sure. He's right here, we could talk to him, see? This is not the first time we've heard of this ritual, of course, and for it to have been such a pivotal moment in the town's history 70 years ago, it's mighty convenient that the townspeople seem to have forgotten about it, or at least are ignoring any possible connection. These are similar circumstances to Kathy's case, yet we've heard no mention of Cougar or the death journey ritual until we began to dig deep and uncover information ourselves. I'm not really sure what to make of all of this either. Are people willingly ignoring this connection, or are they incapable of making it in the first place due to a lack of information? It's hard to say from our shared perspective with Matthew, who has spent the last 4 days investigating. I would have assumed such an insane crime would be an extremely significant event for the town. It's also very possible that anyone who would make the connection between Cougar and Kathy and Emma's cases is simply ignoring it and hoping that they're not actually connected. Matthew visits Gruber Hospital to talk to Dr. James, who's getting ready to leave for the day. asking him about the drugs and the case from 1958. Dr. James says that he believes Emma is still alive, being held captive by these drug dealers. I don't know exactly what made him jump to this conclusion, but I guess I don't disagree with the logic. I can be optimistic. He hasn't shown much concern for Emma either, which has struck me as weird throughout this entire story, so perhaps this explains that disposition of his. According to him, the success of the death journey ritual results in eternal life being granted to the one who completes such a dangerous journey. An insane thought, by the way. Eternal life doesn't exist. I don't need to say that. Any notion that it does is ridiculous. That's what I think anyway, and I just truly cannot believe that somebody thinks it's real. And Dr. James seems to agree, but then follows it up by saying, eternal life might be stretching it, but apparently some have lived for 400 years or more. I'd like to meet this 400-year-old person Dr. James seems to believe existed. You're as stubborn as ever when it comes to these things. What, convincing myself that the one thing we all have in common as living beings is not real? What are you talking about, Dr. James? The more conversations I have with Dr. James, the more it feels as though he genuinely believes in all of this. He speaks about it not simply from the perspective of a scholar recounting history, but from the perspective of someone who's genuinely fascinated by it and seems to buy into the whole thing. Barbara does tell Matthew something that I find interesting, though. When recounting some conversation she had with Emma, she quotes Emma as having said, "If there's no divine force out there, then how can there be a me to want to see it?" We also find out that after Cougar's murder-suicide, the military became involved in solving the case. It was too much for the sheriff back then to handle. This is only a small town after all. I think Dr. James knows a lot more about Emma than he's letting on, and overall, things really aren't feeling right to me anymore. It just seems too convenient for the entire police force to forget about such a bizarre case with the occult motives and not be exploring that as a potential angle in any way. The precedent has already been set in the past, so why not use that to inform this case? Am I crazy? Am I an insane person? Am I fucking crazy, dude? Matthew tries to talk to Father Barton about Cougar's case, but he's not much help. The nun Matthew donates money to on the way out of the church actually provides far more useful information. There's a big tree in Barrows Forest. That's where it happened. According to the nun, who really should have spoken up about this days ago, the big tree gives the power of life. It was worshipped by the indigenous people. Matthew asks if there's any kind of paper trail that Cougar left behind in his research of the death journey ritual, but apparently Father Barton burned it all. I don't know what to make of that. Who would have thought a nun would hold such a key piece of information for us? It seems the citizens of Mizzurna Falls do actually hold knowledge of these things, and are simply not putting all the pieces together. That's what it feels like to me, at least. In room 2 at the motel, Matthew finds Lorraine, who's covering for Mel. It's obvious he's around here, but she refuses to help us out.
I shouldn't have said that. I think I really pissed him off. I gotta get out of here.
Matthew gets in his Beetle Adventure racing car and chases him down. This section is fun. It's the only time you get to use the hitbox of the car for anything other than getting stuck on huge ambiguous PS1 geometry. Matthew just barely manages to knock Mel off of his bike, and he's arrested once more. Morgan, after talking to Mel, gives Matthew the details of the night of the 23rd. Mel went to the motel with the drugs and met Emma and Kathy. He bought the drugs from Bonehead. Kathy set up the connect. She was too scared to buy the drugs herself. According to Mel, his presence in the forest wasn't required, so he just wasn't there. Kathy met someone else in front of the big tree, which is a little confusing. If the necklace does indeed imply the presence of another party, at least. Down in the holding cells, Mel is uncharacteristically forthcoming with Matthew. He asks about Bonehead and Mel warns him not to get involved. Apparently, Bonehead used to be Isabella's driver. Of course, she's involved with this too. That's it though, we get nothing else from him. Isabella doesn't respond when Matthew knocks on her door late at night for some reason, so he visits Uncle Naz's apartment instead. He hasn't seen her around lately and suggests that Matthew sneak into her room. If there's any lesson to take from Mizzurna Falls, it's that people in this town really have no sense of boundaries. Yeah, you need access to this woman? Just fucking break into her apartment, dude. And this is where the lighter finally makes its appearance, if you can believe it. These air ducts would otherwise be unnavigable. For an apartment complex this run down, though, they're impeccably clean. I guess spider webs were too high fidelity for the PS1. Matthew drops down into Isabella's apartment and finds that the place shows signs of some kind of struggle. There's a photo of a cabin on the floor, probably a future destination of ours. As Matthew steps out of the apartment, this guy again! Matthew chases him down and demands information about Isabella. He points him towards the junkyard, which is a location we have yet to visit. Matthew lets him get away after this, though, and I feel bad for Isabella. Stalkers are, kind of the worst. And it's here where Matthew finds the mother lode. Underneath a seat in this bus, at the back of the junkyard, there's an entire cartel worth of epic. Obviously, we need to report this to someone. When Matthew steps outside to do so, he comes across a dog, but this guy is no Rodriguez. Trying to get away from him is the single most difficult part of the game. You can't simply run. Of course, in this case, Matthew can't outrun a dog. Did I mention that he outran a bear previously? In order to get away from this junkyard dog, you have to run around in circles to avoid his dash, and if you ever touch his hitbox, you take 25% damage. It's very unforgiving and a bit frustrating. After that boss battle, Matthew reports his findings to Morgan and he sets up cop shop. Nobody's allowed in, including Matthew. Even flashing his very real badge at the guy guarding the gate does no good. It's not until good old Hudson shows up that he actually gets back into the junkyard to talk to Morgan. Turns out Dennis is the listed owner of the junkyard, which really isn't surprising. He owns half of Mizzurna Falls, but this is a pretty bad look for him. There's not much of anything left to do at this point in the day, so Matthew heads home to rest. Though this was another very productive series of events. I think the most compelling part of all of this, besides the entire reveal of the case that should still hold relevance in this community that seems to have forgotten about it, is that Dr. James officially now gives me the creeps. His facade of stoicism is starting to give way to slightly more sinister undertones that I'm having trouble ignoring. Why is he so confident in Emma's health and well-being when nobody else has any idea where she is? The next morning, Matthew tries to enter Morgan's office to speak with him, but is stopped by Mary Lou. This is when Dennis walks out, very loudly frustrated by his interrogation. Like father, like son, I guess. But it's his own fault that his property was home to felonious amounts of hallucinogenics. Apparently, he hasn't used the junkyard in years, though, and wouldn't know if someone was sneaking in there. A cute excuse, but that doesn't put him above the law. I'm just kidding. He's rich. He can do whatever he wants. In the strategy room, they've marked down all of the known information about the case, and Matthew puts together one important key theme here. All of the locations of interest belong to Dennis. The farmhousing, the junkyard. He doesn't own the forest, thankfully, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did. Mary Lou reveals that the cabin on the other side of the lake belongs to him as well, that same cabin we found a photo of in Isabella's room last night. When Matthew asks to rent a boat to head across the lake, he's initially denied. Come to find out that the owner of the boathouse was strong-armed into denying boat access to anyone else. That's not going to stop Matthew. Before he can actually get on board, though, he is stopped by Winona, the one person who will stop Matthew. She got back into the main building of the school without him and found something in Kathy's locker. A note.
24th at Woods with Emma.
There's also a phone number at the bottom, and when Matthew calls it, he finds out it's a direct line to Dr. Samuel at the hospital. We'll worry about that later, though. Matthew executes some more cartoon shenanigans to find Isabella in the cabin with some guy. The conversation is your usual villain dialogue.
If it was up to me, I'd have killed you already, but he told me not to.
When this guy steps out, Matthew gets Isabella's attention and tries to escort her back to the mainland. Of course, it's never that easy. We gotta fight Sandman. What a badass cool name. Wow, dude. Do you put people to sleep in your cozy little cabin? This fight is tough. Sandman has quick attacks that are difficult to dodge, and he deals about 5 times the damage Matthew does. After a solid 7 minutes of attempts, Matthew finally wins and can escape with Isabella. Before getting on the boat, though, Isabella lets us know that Emma is actually alive. Not only was Isabella shot, we also find out that Dennis is dead, shot himself with his own gun. If things weren't already reaching a fever pitch before, it's getting pretty real now. That's quite an extreme reaction to being interrogated for something he claimed to have no connection to. We're completely out of leads now, save for the note that Winona gave Matthew. Since the phone number reaches Dr. Samuel, I guess that's our next destination. Creepy Dr. Samuel gave Kathy his number while he was drunk at Bar Wolves. Kathy, the 16-year-old girl, who shouldn't have been at the bar to begin with. People really play loose with the rules in Mizzurna Falls. He says she was with someone named Loretta, who is the girl Matthew met at the funeral a few days ago. He also says that Loretta is the taco girl. Say no more. I know exactly where we're going next.
This seems like such a nice, peaceful town, but a hell of a lot's been going on in the shadows.
We stop by Isabella's room, and she's stable, thankfully. They removed the bullet, and she's doing all right, but we're not allowed to visit her. She's not conscious at the moment. And that's fine. She's in good hands. Well, she's in hands. Back at the sheriff's department, Matthew spots Wolf walking out as he arrives. He was being questioned, apparently. According to Wolf, Dennis allowed Isabella to have a room in his apartment complex only if she could find people to sell drugs to. Then those clients were handed off to Bonehead to deal with. This was all in response to her being lost after the death of her husband, and obviously, Wolf was well aware of all of this. Just as obvious is the fact that Dennis was very clearly involved with this drug trade. I don't think that surprises anyone. This is maybe the first time we've learned much of anything about Wolf, though. A guy like that, with the knowledge he has of gangs and the drug trade going on in the town, someone like that certainly isn't trustworthy, and he gave off that vibe as early as we first met him. He's not the kind of guy you get comfortable around. According to Morgan, though, Wolf feels regretful of his actions, which I find hard to believe. What is this, by the way? Wolf snitching to get suspicion off his own back? I can't think of any other reason behind this entire series of events here. Maybe it's because Dennis is dead that he felt like just spilling it all was an okay move. Whatever the case, there's obviously no evidence actually tying Wolf to any crime here, so he's free to just do whatever. It's time to meet the taco lady, Loretta. She operates a taco truck right across the street from Matthew's house, which is really cool. He asks her about Kathy, but she refuses to say much of anything.
I can't talk here. You never know where that priest's lurking.
She asks for Matthew's Sony brand phone shape number and tells him she'll contact him later. Another lead we can follow up on in due time. Her specific mention of Father Barton is telling as well. I expect a lot from her. She really seems to hate that guy as much as I do. Matthew didn't even know who this woman was until a few days ago, much less that her and Kathy were connected. And at this point, I think we all know that whatever ideas our protagonist held about the nature of both Emma's and Kathy's character is simply the mask they showed the world. And for Matthew, learning this fact, specifically as it pertains to Emma, has to sting a little bit. You see, there's something going on in this game that I haven't discussed yet. A small underlying theme that helps drive Matthew's unrelenting motivation to solve this case and find Emma. It's mentioned at the very beginning of the game in the first phone call with Winona, and Winona herself even brings it up later the same day. Matthew has feelings for Emma, but he clearly doesn't even know who she really is. She never let him see that dark and arguably real side of her. And I think this is a bit of an understated theme in the game. It serves as the impetus of the entire investigation as far as Matthew is concerned, but they really don't use it for anything. I mean, imagine if this wasn't a girl he had a crush on. He would probably never put in this much energy towards the investigation. As the story progresses and he learns more, he starts to begin to understand the true nature of the girl he's had a thing for who has refused to let him in. From an outside perspective, I can imagine this not being exactly an enjoyable experience for Matthew. His determination never wanes, however. We need some kind of vehicle driving the plot forward, after all. For some reason, the guys who were beating up Father Barton are here at the church to repent. This scene is bizarre and feels as though it's hinting at something further, but I can't piece together anything from this. It could be as simple as it appears on its face, but I thought this interaction was interesting and worth mentioning. Believe it or not, there's not all that much investigating left to do at this point. We are free to practice our driving skills and look around Mizzurna Falls until Matthew receives a phone call at around 8 p.m. from Loretta. She tells him to meet her at Bar Wolves where they can finally talk. She calls Dr. Samuel a pervert and a creep, but I think we all figured that out already. She met Kathy at this very same bar, and apparently they instantly had a connection.
Life was dull for her, too. Everyone thought she was like some kind of saint. But she was just 16, you know? She wanted to have fun just like everyone else. But she had to be careful of that father of hers.
She recounts what she believes Kathy's life was like under Father Barton's strict parenting. In one instance, Father Barton found her at the bar, and Loretta claims that this terrified Kathy. Not in the normal parent finds you drinking kind of way, but true deep terror. Kathy never showed up at the bar again after that. Then, on the night of the 24th, Loretta spotted Kathy.
It was like she was dead inside. I called her name over and over, but she just... When she finally heard me, you know what she said to me?
"Damn it, Winona!" Just when things were getting good. In a bit of a timid state, which isn't extremely uncommon for her, she tells Matthew that she's headed to see Father Barton. We'll follow up with her on this later, but we have to find out what Loretta knows first. Besides, Winona walks everywhere. It'll take her like 2 hours to get up to Cockland Peaks. She'll be fine. When Matthew tells Loretta about the phone call he just received, she gets fired up. She tells him to stay away from Father Barton, but naive Matthew apparently hasn't picked up on a single weird thing about him. Nothing. His bizarre behavior, his monetary bribe, the many things people have said about him, the things he's said himself. How about the time he killed his daughter? Matthew has picked up on none of it, which is upsetting, because Matthew is otherwise usually a very good stand-in for the player. Loretta finally finishes her thought.
This is what Kathy said to me that day. My father killed me.
Loretta didn't know about the bruising, and Matthew didn't suspect anything at all about who Father Barton might really be. With these two pieces of information meeting, Matthew finally picks up on what's happening. Winona has already figured it out. Back at the church, neither Father Barton nor Winona are anywhere to be found. Looking around, Matthew finds a letter in Kathy's room, written December 24th, signed by Kathy Flannery.
I hope that whoever reads this letter will understand just a little of how I'm feeling. Today, the most horrible thing in my whole life happened to me. My father strangled me and tried to kill me. Someone please tell me, was it so wrong for me to have gone against my father's wishes? The image of my father's face as he was choking me is burned into my mind. Everything just seems so pointless now. Everything. Tonight I'm going to the forest with Emma. Even if nothing good happens, I don't care anymore. No matter what happens, I can't imagine anything more terrifying than what I felt in that moment.
As early as the prologue, I had suspected Father Barton was responsible for Kathy's death. Not directly, maybe, technically, but you don't have a response like that to your father showing up unless he's done something horrible. It's the most obvious connection in the history of storytelling, and it's baffling to me that people in this town just don't get it. Matthew wakes up in the basement and Father Barton begins to unravel, blabbering about how sinful of a child Kathy was, how she befouled the life she should have had. Between his religious bullshit, he does drop a few pieces of useful information. On the 23rd, he actually spotted them at a motel high on the drugs.
That's when I received my holy orders, telling me not to let them get away with it.
Which literally just means he decided to make her stop. The whole holy orders thing is just an excuse to brush off responsibility. I hate this kind of thing so much. Matthew mentions how maybe Father Barton should have done his job as both a father and a priest and listened to them, forgiven them, maybe. You know, like the people who beat him up and then apologized that he forgave. Naturally, the moment Matthew brings all of this up, Father Barton snaps at him for trying to preach to him. What are we doing, dude? Nothing this guy is saying makes any sense. Father Barton then admits to his sin of strangling Kathy. He wasn't quite able to kill her, though. What a merciful, great guy, showing such restraint. I guess killing her was the holy order somehow, and he failed? So is he a sinner, or did he disobey God? You know what I mean? He spirals into some kind of discussion about morality, more nonsense. According to him, morality exists, but it's irrelevant because we're human and we act on emotion. However, since we can't act off of emotion alone, which is already contradictory to his previous point, that's where God finds his place in our lives. Maybe I'm insane, but I just don't get what he's saying here.
God is morality, and morality is God.
I think this angle of religion is portrayed very well considering this is a Japanese game. Not all religious people are like this, not all religions are like this, but the writers have a very solid grasp on some of the shit that actually can happen in these communities, tropey as it may seem. There's a reason this kind of thing is so common in media. After escaping his restraints, Matthew meets Winona in the hallway. She had just arrived, blissfully unaware of what just happened. And I knew it. Winona literally walks everywhere. Father Barton's body is taken away, and Matthew tells Morgan everything. Winona brings us back down to reality a bit, speculating that maybe Father Barton was in the forest with Emma and Kathy that night. Morgan doesn't really believe that to be the case. He doesn't think Father Barton would just leave them there. I wouldn't put it past him personally, considering his very important holy orders that he must follow, but I see where Morgan's coming from. It's clear to us now that Kathy and Emma both willingly went into the forest with an unidentified third party in order to do something. I wonder what it could be. Probably not the death journey ritual. That would be stupid. Hey man, how's it going? Cool. It's pretty cold. Rather than heading home to rest based on Morgan's suggestion, Matthew finds himself doing some late-night investigating. Whatever his hunch is, it brings us to the giant tree in Barrows Forest.
I wonder if the two of them performed the death journey ritual here. If so, that would mean Emma knew how to perform it. Eternal life. Ridiculous.
He decides to go discuss the odd feelings about the forest that Cohen had the night of the event, if you remember earlier on. When he arrives at Cohen's cabin, though, the front door is open and we hear glass breaking upstairs. Matthew finds Cohen knocked out on the floor in one of the rooms. Seems he just fell. He breaks in to rescue Cohen, and Cohen's whisked off to Gruber Hospital. He's fine, though. It was just exhaustion. And that wraps up another day in Mizzurna Falls. A very intense day at that. I wish I had some more thoughts about it, but this day was honestly just exhausting. Matthew is back in Barrows Forest the next morning, but it's blocked off once more. Cohen absolutely insisted it be closed off again. Matthew finally gets an opportunity to talk to him in the hospital, and he tells him that he closed off the forest because it felt wrong, just like it did the night of Emma's disappearance. Still not really sure what that means. Matthew asks him about his role as arbiter of the forest, but Cohen asks that we take care of something for him first. With the key he gave Matthew, we access his office and find the document he asked us to bring him.
U.S. Department of Defense. The cover says Project Mizzurna.
We know Cohen used to be in the military, and this official government document leads Matthew to believe that perhaps he knows what this Project Mizzurna is. This document refers to the murder that took place in 1958, where Cougar killed Barbara's younger sister in the death journey ritual. Well, it turns out the government got involved not because they were all that interested in the murder itself. Who cares about that part? What they were really interested in was the ritual itself. Cohen believes that perhaps the death journey ritual was attempted at the big tree, but he can't find any proof of this. When Matthew brings up the necklace he found in the bear's claw, though, that's all the evidence Cohen needs. This necklace is known as the Prophet Necklace. Turns out it's actually important. The Prophet guides performers of the ritual, the guy who's standing up in the cave painting. Pretty solid proof that the death journey ritual was indeed undertaken, given everything else we know at this point. Emma, Kathy, and the unnamed third party performed the ritual, but were attacked by the bear by pure chance. Cohen tells Matthew to go report all of this to Morgan immediately. Before leaving, though, Matthew plays the tape he received from Isabella a few nights back, the one with the song Eternal on it.
I said before how the military was investigating the death journey ritual, right? Why do you think they were doing that? Back then, the military was running all sorts of tests of post-death experiences, placing a person in a state of temporary death, then reviving them with electric jolts. The tests went very well. The test subjects indeed died and were brought back to the land of the living. I know because I was one of the test subjects.
Cohen proceeds to wax poetic about this other world he observed while dead. Such a strange world, warm, vast, everywhere a beautiful melody playing, the same melody from the song Eternal, which is precisely the same story Isabella had that led to her writing the song in the first place. A near-death experience and a world wherein she heard this melody.
Maybe this is the song of God, or maybe it's just part of our DNA, a memory left over from long ago.
So this death journey ritual, despite its horrible, unfounded, selfish origins, continues to be a majorly important piece of Mizzurna Falls, even to this day. The song's importance and close ties to the afterlife, while I'm not sure I buy any of it, some might just label me a skeptic. Maybe I should keep a more open mind about these things. Or maybe that's just how this town gets you. Talking to Dr. James, Matthew asks if he believes Emma and Kathy performed the ritual. He says it's likely Emma wasn't aware of how the ritual worked, but Kathy might have had the necessary knowledge. After all, she was raised in the same church as Cougar. Perhaps she knew everything about the case, and maybe even read his research papers on the ritual. We find out that Mizzurna is a native word that loosely translates to God. Some kind of deity, at least. So it's not just a fun word someone came up with for the title of the game. Like most named locations, it actually holds deep meaning within the region. Matthew wants to learn more about this Mizzurna stuff, and so Dr. James invites him to his lakeside home later that night to discuss it.
I'll tell you everything I know about the Mizzurna and the Death Journey ritual.
After talking with Dr. James, Matthew heads back up to Cockland Peaks to check out something that's been bugging me this whole time. The painting in the basement of the church of the devil worshipping the full moon. A description that sounds similar to the painting in the cave, inexplicably present within the basement of the church. We haven't actually observed this basement painting firsthand, and I don't believe it exists. When Matthew enters, though, he finds Dr. James here. Kind of weird, at least he'll give us some insight into the painting, I'm sure. It seems as though a full moon is required in order to perform the ritual. As it turns out, there just so happened to be a full moon on the 24th, the night of Emma and Kathy's ritual. Better yet, there's another full moon on the 31st, tomorrow night. And that's all we get. No explanation as to why Dr. James is here in the first place. No explanation as to why the painting remains visible and completely uncovered. We just leave. Dr. James reveals plenty of information about the ritual based off of a book he read on the subject.
In order to perform the ritual, one must take a certain drug and enter a state of temporary death. The prophet places the sacred necklace around the neck of the one undergoing the ritual, and finally, the Mizzurna will descend and enter their soul. The dead person, now one with the Mizzurna, will be reborn with full knowledge of the other side.
But Matthew isn't buying it. Rightfully so, I would argue. He doesn't understand why people would want anything to do with this eternal life and the supernatural. And honestly, I agree with him. This is all nonsense.
Why do you think these things, gods, demons, miracles, have appeared in human history since ancient times?
I don't know, maybe because people are simple and want easy explanations for complicated concepts and excuses for coincidental events that hold significant meaning in their life? Just a guess? Dr. James has a very different answer.
Because we have to live here on this planet which we still know so little about. Another reason is that all of those things exist in some shape or form.
I was on board with the first sentence. That's kind of what I was saying. But then he's just like, also because it's all real and I know it's real. He believes all of this. He even outright states that he wants to see these things for himself.
Then why don't you go perform the Death Journey ritual? If I ever get the chance, I will.
Matthew takes the opportunity to head home on that note. I would probably leave too. And that's the end of that day. It's becoming more and more obvious to me why nobody wants to entertain the idea that this death journey ritual stuff was likely the motive behind the murder and disappearance. Because it's fucking stupid. It's so obviously not real, but I guess if you're stuck in a tiny town doing the same mundane job day in and day out, you'll eventually find a niche interest to latch onto. It doesn't even seem to matter how extreme of a belief it may be or what real-life consequences might come from it. The next morning, Matthew receives a call from Uncle Nas letting him know that Dr. James is at the shop to see him. He's here to lend Matthew that book on the death journey ritual that he was recounting last night. Then he goes into a weird monologue about morals, likely in an attempt to justify his bizarre beliefs. He says that Matthew has a very modern set of morals and viewpoints. Modern values are built upon the values of yesteryear, and those values were built upon values from even further back. I'm not sure what his point is, other than that by educating ourselves on history, we can have the knowledge of 1,000 lifetimes, which is actually a way better conclusion to reach than where I thought he was going. Then he brings up Isabella, who's still in the hospital.
If I were the criminal, I wouldn't let Isabella linger on without finishing her off.
And this is how you confess to crimes without actually ever saying you did it. By now, I had become a master at navigating Mizzurna Falls. What was once a nice new town with a confusing layout has become comfortable. I was really able to just enjoy the atmosphere of the world, and it made my second playthrough very enjoyable. I haven't focused very much on the gameplay in Mizzurna Falls, because it's a pretty simple game overall. This could have been a visual novel, though that presentation would have hurt its underground appeal for me, honestly. Matthew goes to check up on Isabella and finds Winona waiting outside the room. At the same time, Wolf shows up and jokes that if she doesn't recover quickly, the bar will lose customers. Matthew isn't happy about that.
He just watched Dennis manipulate Isabella without doing a thing.
A while back, Wolf mentioned how Emma had a run-in with some guy at the bar, where she stabbed him in the leg with a fork. Winona recounts Emma's retelling of the event, saying that Wolf was weird about it, that he was overly concerned about Emma, as though she was a precious thing he didn't want damaged. Matthew's still not allowed in Isabella's room since she hasn't regained consciousness, so he heads outside. This is when we spot Wolf getting into a car with Bonehead. Best buds, I guess. Is anybody really surprised that they're connected? He follows them to Bar Wolves and finds Mel here. He's causing a scene looking for Bonehead. I never thought I'd feel sympathy for Mel, and I don't generally agree with his actions, but he did just lose his father and he's looking for answers. Before we can get any further into this, though, Morgan shows up to put an end to it and receives a call. Isabella is awake, finally. Morgan has to stop by the station before he can get to the hospital, which will prove to be a huge mistake. So Winona and Matthew head back to the hospital on their own, but things aren't right. Someone's on the floor in the lobby, dead. Matthew tells Winona to go get Morgan, and he heads up to Isabella's room. The deputy guarding her door is on the ground, and we hear Isabella scream from the downstairs basement. She's in this operating room tied to a chair, invisible tape on her mouth. Just then, Bonehead shows up and pulls a gun on Matthew, but before he can shoot him, Dr. James disarms him with a gun of his own. Bonehead runs away, but Dr. James insists we don't give chase. Isabella, now untaped, tells him that Emma's going to be killed.
It was Wolf controlling everything from the shadows. He's the one who's been holding Emma captive.
Apparently, he takes women he likes and makes them his slaves. Gross, dude. And this is what actually happened to Isabella as well. Wolf wasn't there for her when she needed help. He was there to take her captive and control her. Feeling a profound sense of guilt, Isabella admits that she introduced Emma to Wolf. There's not really any time to pass judgment right now, though. Time is of the essence. We're just outside of Mel's house, across the street at the Aston Farm warehouse. Dr. James hands Matthew a gun and he goes looking for Emma. Inside the barn, Matthew finds Wolf, Bonehead, and Emma. This is the first time we've seen her alive in the flesh. In the PS1 flesh. Wolf was behind everything. He even staged Dennis's death to make it look like a suicide. Matthew pulls out his invisible gun and everyone pretends it's real. Then Wolf does the same, pointing it at Emma and effectively disarming Matthew. Fight time. Our opponent is Bonehead, and he deals about 1/6 of Matthew's health bar with every hit. Matthew's hits are just as strong, right? Well, how's about 1/20th of his health bar sound? Because that's how much damage Matthew does. It took me about 10 attempts to beat this guy, and this isn't even the toughest fight in the game. Eventually, Matthew beats the shit out of yet someone else who looks way tougher than him, and Wolf loses it. Before he can get to Matthew, though, Bonehead gets him back with a quick shot of his own, and the barn ignites. Wolf takes Emma and leaves, and Matthew gives chase. He follows Wolf and proceeds to inject him with 60 bullets and pushes him to the top of the roof. Wolf is now out of bullets and downs more pills. I guess he's been on hallucinogenics this entire time, yet somehow managed to maintain his composure. There's some more nonsense discussion here about nature and gods, but I really just don't care anymore. I'm done hearing it. We enter the single toughest fight in the game against Wolf himself. If there's one skill you need that will get you through these fights, it's ducking. I actually beat him on my first try using this strategy. Wolf is somehow still up and around threatening Matthew. That is, of course, until a mysterious stranger finally takes him out. And it's at this point that we learn that Emma's been drugged, presumably forced to take Epic all hours of the day. The police finally arrive, and Morgan lets Matthew know that Dr. James is taking Emma to the hospital. She's not in any life-threatening danger, just high out of her mind. When Matthew mentions the cops shooting Wolf and saving him, Morgan is confused.
Shoot him? I didn't shoot anyone. None of us shot anyone. There's been no reports of that.
Matthew worries that Wolf might have had another accomplice, and that's when a deputy shows up and informs Morgan that the ambulance carrying Emma never arrived. Matthew immediately believes it has something to do with the ritual, and he's off to Barrows Forest to try and find Emma. Upon his arrival, he spots Dr. James on the ground, who tells him that Emma's in danger, and Matthew rushes into the forest. Cohen is waiting for him for some reason, and he hands him his shotgun, says they should split up and search for Emma separately. Matthew quickly finds her at the big tree, still alive.
She's fine. Now isn't that nice?
Matthew's shot placing our perspective just a bit too low to make out the culprit. Matthew recognizes them, but before he can say anything, and the credits roll. This ending, this lingering feeling of what happens next, All of this investigating just to die without seeing any kind of conclusion. It being cut short and left unresolved feels wrong. It feels like this wasn't what was intended by the writers. And that's because it wasn't. See, I had missed one step, a single piece of evidence I needed to gather. What we just saw was simply one of the bad endings, where you do everything else right, hit all the major story beats, but miss a single piece of evidence. The other bad ending is simply failing to make enough progress on the investigation. You receive a phone call from Morgan that they found Emma's body, and there's similarly no real conclusion to be had. I think getting these endings first on accident was kind of a good thing though. Now, let's take a few steps back. Dr. James. He retrieved the necklace from Morgan a while ago. If we ask him if we can see it, Matthew notices a giant scratch on his back.
These kind of look like claw marks.
He borrows the necklace, and this seems to piss off Dr. James a bit, but he rebounds effortlessly, putting back on the stoic, well-spoken scholar facade. And that's what it was. Because we missed this one piece of evidence, the wound on his back, we never uncovered the truth. This time at Barrows Forest, Cohen comes along with Matthew, and instead of Matthew getting shot, it's Cohen who takes the bullet. Dr. James pops another pill and admits it.
That's right, detective. I'm the bad guy. I'm the one who synthesized this drug for the ritual.
He's the one who sold it to Wolf. He was helping Matthew out because he was looking for Emma himself. It was him who was with Emma and Kathy that night to perform the ritual. He had the wound on his back because he was also attacked by the bear. It was Dr. James who shot and killed Wolf on the roof, saving us. From his perspective, he was simply trying to save Emma and Kathy, two girls who he believes were weak, who couldn't handle reality. Truthfully, though, he was only in it for the promise of eternal life, and he admits as much. He wasn't even confident he'd succeed, he just wanted to experience the unknown. His whole plan was to lure Matthew here to get back the prophet necklace he took from him earlier. After firing a warning shot into Matthew's arm just as a show of power, Cohen comes to the rescue with a shot of his own. At that exact moment, the epic that Emma was drugged with begins to wear off and she bolts. With Cohen's gun, Matthew chases after them. He eventually finds the two of them, but Dr. James appears to be having a bit of an issue. The incredibly powerful hallucinogenic drugs he synthesized were too strong, it turns out, and he begins to lose himself entirely. He even puts on the anime villain reveal face, you know the one. Big lips, a scowl, disheveled hair, angry eyebrows.
What's the point in dying? It's as if you never existed at all.
And continues to down more pills. Matthew takes him out with a single clean shot. Dr. James's gun do go off though, and Matthew finds himself in the hospital the next day, conscious and presumably good to continue living for a normal human amount of time. Emma's parents are reunited with their daughter, Isabella leaves town, and we end Mizzurna Falls on the shot of its true namesake. No supernatural nonsense or native stories, it's 1998. There are lives to live. We can't spend them chasing an unending version of that. And that's Mizzurna Falls. Not every question gets an answer. Not every person gets justice. Sometimes the best you can hope for is to just keep on living peacefully. The death journey ritual was definitely not real, but whether it worked or not doesn't change the fact that people died because of that. And I think that's what this game leaves behind more than anything. The realization that belief doesn't need to be true to hold power. The truth is, most people in Mizzurna Falls never wanted answers. They just wanted all the bad stuff to go away. And by the end, that's what they got, whether or not anyone deserved it. 1998 was almost 30 years ago. It won't be long until this is just another 40-year-old story.